He looked me in the eye, smiled for the cameras, and fired me in front of the entire floor. And he had no idea who I really was. The conference room was packed, the kind of staged gathering meant to look spontaneous. Mid-level managers lined the walls, assistants perched on the edges of chairs. Someone with a company polo held up a phone to record for internal morale purposes. I was standing at the far end of the table, my chair, the same one I'd used for 3 years, still warm from the hours I'd spent there that morning. "Effective immediately," he said, his voice smooth and deliberate. "Your services are no longer required." A ripple went through the room, a cough, the shuffle of someone shifting in their seat. Most people kept their eyes fixed on the polished tabletop, but a few stole glances at me, the way people glance at a car accident, unwilling to watch, unable to look away. He slid a white envelope across the table. The corner brushed my fingertips before I even reached for it. My name was typed neatly on the front in black ink. "This is for the best," he added, leaning back with the confidence of a man who thought the story ended here. I let the envelope sit between us for a moment before picking it up. It felt lighter than I'd expected. "You think so?" I asked, my voice even. "I know so," he replied, flashing a grin at the phone camera in the corner. Somewhere behind him, one of the junior analysts shifted uncomfortably. She'd been in the break room the day I fixed the jammed printer, the same day I'd spent 20 minutes talking her through a budget she didn't understand. She knew me as the quiet guy from operations. That's all anyone thought I was. I opened the envelope, glanced at the single sheet inside, and folded it shut again. Severance. Barely enough to cover 2 months of bills for someone who'd given half a decade of their life here. I set the envelope down on the table. "Noted," I said, and stepped back. His eyes narrowed slightly, like he was expecting a protest, maybe even a scene. But I gave him nothing, just a calm nod and a slow turn toward the door. The hallway outside felt louder than usual, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, voices carrying sharp edges. No one met my gaze. In the reflection of the glass wall, I caught sight of myself. A plain work shirt, an employee badge clipped neatly to my belt, a face no one here thought twice about. The elevator ride down was silent except for the faint hum of cables. I stared at the mirrored panel in front of me. The man looking back wore the same clothes as yesterday, but the set of his jaw was different. At the lobby, the security guard, broad-shouldered, kind-eyed, gave me a sympathetic nod. He thought I was just another casualty of a strategic reorganization. Outside, the air was sharp with midday sun. Across the street, a billboard towered over traffic. Our company's logo bright and clean against a blue sky. The slogan read, "Driven by Integrity." I almost laughed. I stood there a long moment, watching the cars slide past, the logo staring down like a lie carved in stone. 3 years in the shadows, and this was how he thought it would end. Quietly, with me walking away. He didn't know that the man he'd just fired was the one who signed his contract. And before this week was over, he'd know exactly how big his mistake was. After my father died, the board expected me to take his place without hesitation. They wanted continuity, a smooth handover, a familiar face for shareholders. And for 3 months, I played along. I stood at the head of the walnut table, wearing his chair like an ill-fitting suit, listening to speeches I'd heard all my life. I signed the contracts, shook the hands, posed for the photographs. Then I resigned. They told themselves I'd step down because I couldn't handle the grief. That was the version they preferred, clean, sympathetic, and easy to repeat at investor dinners. The truth was simpler and sharper. I didn't trust what I was seeing. I wanted to know the truth about my company, and you can't see clearly from the top floor. So I vanished. Not from the company, from its hierarchy. My resume was rewritten, my name trimmed to initials, my title reduced to operations coordinator. No one connected that title with ownership. I took a desk in a quiet corner of a mid-level department, close enough to the floor to smell the work, far enough from the glass offices to hear unfiltered voices. At first, the anonymity felt like freedom. I could eat lunch in the cafeteria without cameras catching the angle. I could talk to welders, drivers, and machinists without anyone straightening their posture or rehearsing their words. And what I heard in those unguarded moments was a company slipping. Small things at first, the overtime cuts, the travel budget slashed, the maintenance requests delayed. But small things become culture, and culture becomes rot. The man I'd chosen to replace me, Marcus Gray, was magnetic in public. He had a smile that could land investment deals and a speech pattern that made shareholders believe we were the next great American empire. But the magnetism ended when the lights went off. Behind closed doors, he spoke about redundancies, like they were numbers, not people. He called safety reports red tape and told managers to push them through instead of fixing the issues. I stayed quiet. I took notes. I built files, production reports that didn't match the official summaries, expense ledgers with suspicious consulting fees, safety audits rewritten before submission. 2 years into my exile, I overheard something that changed my timeline. In the break room, 2 project managers whispered over coffee about a streamline before the merger. 400 jobs on the chopping block. Entire divisions erased. Not because we were in trouble, but because Marcus wanted a cleaner profit line to parade in front of potential buyers. That night, I stayed late under the excuse of finalizing shift schedules. The building was nearly silent, the machines cooling in the dark. From Marcus's office, I heard his voice through the half-open door. "Yes, the layoffs are locked," he said into the phone. "Council meeting next week. Once the deal's signed, we're golden. And trust me, no one's going to stop it." I wrote it down. Date, time, exact phrasing. It was the moment I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The quiet, methodical gathering of evidence was almost over. The board needed to hear from me, the real me, before those jobs were signed away. I'd planned to choose my own moment, to step out from behind the curtain on my terms. Marcus beat me to it. And in doing so, he handed me the perfect stage. From the moment the envelope touched my hand, I knew I had to move fast. The humiliation was still fresh, but it wasn't anger that pushed me. It was the clock. If Marcus's merger went through, the layoffs would be irreversible, and the damage to the company would spread faster than I could repair it. The morning after my firing, I was back in my office. The real one. The one no one on the floor had seen in 3 years. The walls were lined with photographs of my father on the factory floor, sleeves rolled, grease on his hands. I hadn't changed a thing since the day I'd locked this door and stepped down. I opened the safe, pulled out the files I'd been collecting under my assumed name, and spread them across the desk. Forged safety audits, doctored expense sheets, internal memos approving dangerous shortcuts. My laptop hummed as I synced them with 3 encrypted drives, one for me, one for my attorney, one for the authorities if things went that far. The plan I'd been shaping for months solidified in less than an hour. I would call an emergency board meeting. I'd walk in with every piece of evidence they needed to remove Marcus, and I wouldn't leave until they voted. Before I made the call, I tested the waters. I met privately with 2 board members I trusted, Evelyn Shaw, who had worked alongside my father for 20 years, and David Kim, a quiet but principled investor who cared more about legacy than short-term gain. We met in the back of a quiet steakhouse, the kind of place where the waiters knew to keep their distance. "You've been gone too long," Evelyn said as soon as we sat down. "People have started thinking Marcus is the company." "That ends next week," I said, sliding the first set of documents across the table. Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she scanned them. David took his time, flipping each page slowly, his face unreadable. When he finally looked up, he said, "If half of this is true, he's done." "It's all true," I replied, "and I've got twice as much at the office." Evelyn tapped the stack. "You'll have my vote, but he's going to fight." "I'm counting on it," I said. The next 2 days were a blur of quiet conversations, encrypted emails, and unannounced visits to people Marcus thought were firmly in his corner. Some stayed silent. Some hinted they'd been waiting for an opening. A few tried to warn me off, which told me Marcus was already nervous. On Thursday afternoon, I sent the formal request for an emergency session. By corporate bylaws, I had that right as majority owner, a fact Marcus had either forgotten or never truly understood. That evening, I stayed in the empty office long after dark. From the window, the factory lights glowed across the lot, workers finishing the late shift. I could almost see my father there, laughing with the crew, taking the long way around just to shake every hand. I thought about the people whose jobs Marcus was about to erase, The machinist whose son had just started college, the receptionist who brought coffee for the entire front desk every Monday, the engineer who still carried the watch my father gave him on his 10th anniversary. They didn't know I was coming for him. Not yet. By Monday morning, they would. The boardroom smelled faintly of leather and fresh polish, the kind of sterile perfection Marcus loved. He was already at the head of the table when I walked in, wearing that tailored navy suit that photographed well in annual reports. His smile froze halfway when he saw me. "You're not on the agenda," he said. "I am the agenda," I replied, setting a thick black binder on the table. The sound it made drew every eye in the room. Evelyn was 2 seats down, pen in hand, eyes steady. David Kim adjusted his glasses, giving me the smallest nod. The rest of the board shifted uncomfortably, some curious, some wary. "As majority owner," I began, "I've called this emergency session to address gross misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty by our current CEO." A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus leaned back, laughing under his breath. This should be good. I opened the binder and began laying out documents, one by one. Safety audits altered to remove critical failures. Budget cuts signed personally by Marcus that bypassed both the board and compliance protocols. Wire transfers to consulting firms that shared a registered address with one of his private accounts. Evelyn broke the silence. "These are internal records. How did you get them?" I met her gaze. "I've been working inside this company for the past 3 years. Not as owner, not as chairman, as a floor-level operations coordinator. I wanted to see what was happening without the filter. This is what I found." The shock landed unevenly. A few jaws dropped, others tightened. Marcus tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "You're claiming these are real?" "They are real, and here are the originals." I slid a separate folder across the table toward the general counsel, a man who had served my father loyally for decades. He flipped through them, his frown deepening with each page. "This is substantial," he said finally. Marcus's charm cracked. "This is a stunt. He's bitter about being fired." "I own this company," I cut in. "And you've been bleeding it for personal gain. The layoffs you've scheduled have nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with inflating our books for a merger that benefits you, not the company." I pulled out the final piece, a recorded phone call from his office, his voice clear as glass. "Once the deal's signed, we're golden. No one's going to stop it." The room went still. Evelyn leaned forward. I moved for a vote of no confidence. "I second," David said. Marcus's head whipped around. "You're making a mistake. I'll bury all of you in litigation." "You won't have the chance," I said. "Bylaws give the board the right to remove you with cause, and cause is exactly what we have." The vote was called. One by one, hands went up. Even those I doubted raised theirs without hesitation. Unanimous. Marcus sat there, frozen, his grip on the armrest white-knuckled. "You think you've won," he said quietly. "I know I've saved what matters," I replied. The chair at the head of the table was empty now. I didn't sit in it. Not yet. The room wasn't finished with him, and neither was I. The meeting adjourned, but Marcus didn't leave. He stayed in his chair while the others filed out, his eyes fixed on me like a man calculating the next move in a game he'd just lost. "You think this is over?" he said when the door finally closed. "It's over for you," I replied, gathering the binder. His smirk returned, thinner now, stretched over something brittle. "I still have friends on this board. You think they'll back you when the lawsuits start flying? You don't have the stomach for a real fight." I leaned across the table. "You've been bleeding this company for 2 years. Every dollar you took, every safety risk you signed off on, every lie you sold the people who work here, it's all documented. You can throw lawyers at me, but you can't erase your own signature." He stood, straightening his cufflinks, and walked out without another word. But I knew that wasn't retreat. That was repositioning. By the time I reached my office, Evelyn was waiting. "He's not going quietly," she said. "I've already heard he's calling 2 board members, promising them protection if they vote to reinstate him." "He can promise whatever he wants," I said. "We're locking down accounts today." For the next 4 hours, my office turned into a war room. I had the CFO freeze all discretionary spending. It locked Marcus out of every internal system. Legal began drafting formal notifications to regulators about the forged audits and undisclosed transactions. David arrived with a fresh stack of paperwork. "You need to see this," he said, setting it on my desk. "It's a side agreement with the buyers he was courting. They were going to pay him a personal commission for delivering the merger, completely off the books. That was the final nail, not just negligence, but outright corruption. I sent copies to the entire board. No commentary, no spin, just the facts. Within minutes, my phone lit up with calls, some angry, some apologetic, all confirming that Marcus's leverage was crumbling. But he still had one card left. That evening I got a call from the head of HR. "We've received 3 harassment complaints against you," she said carefully. "All from employees you worked with in your operations coordinator role." "They're false," I said. "I believe you," she replied, "but protocol says we have to investigate." I could almost hear Marcus's voice in the silence that followed. False accusations were just another tool to him, a way to stall me, to dirty the water before it cleared. "Do it by the book," I told her, "and make sure the investigators see every scrap of my record here. I have nothing to hide." After hanging up, I sat alone in the darkening office, the hum of the building fading as people went home. The city lights blinked on outside, throwing long shadows across the desk. This wasn't just a fight for ownership anymore. Marcus had shown me he'd dragged the company, its people, and my name through the mud to save himself. Which meant I couldn't just win. I had to strip away every last piece of his influence so there was nothing left for him to claw back. The values my father built this place on weren't words in a mission statement. They were lines in the sand. And I was done letting him cross them. The next morning, I walked the floor for the first time as myself. No alias, no fake title. Just my name on the badge, the name everyone now knew. At first, conversations stopped when I passed. People glanced at each other, unsure if they should greet me or keep their heads down. Then one of the welders, Pete, 25 years here, stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good to have you back," he said. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Others nodded, a few clapped. The ice cracked. I didn't give a speech, not yet. Instead, I listened. I went from department to department, hearing the things no one put in reports, broken equipment patched with duct tape, supervisors pressured to fake efficiency numbers, corners cut in ways that could have cost lives. Every detail went into my notebook. Back in my office, Evelyn and David were waiting. "We've got the regulators moving," Evelyn said. "They want full cooperation." "They'll have it," I said, "and I want every division head in here tomorrow. We're starting from zero." We spent the afternoon drafting a plan, immediate reversal of the planned layoffs, restoration of safety protocols, a freeze on any mergers until a full audit was complete. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was the foundation we needed. While we worked, IT sent over the results of their forensic sweep of Marcus's accounts. More shell companies, more hidden payments, enough to ensure his future was going to be decided in a courtroom, not a boardroom. By evening, Monroe from the regulatory agency called. "Your ex-CEO isn't cooperating," she said. "He's trying to stall, but with what you've given us, that's not going to last." I closed my eyes for a moment. Good. Because we're moving forward with or without him. That night, I stayed late again, the building almost silent. From my window, I could see the glow of the factory floor as the night shift worked. The sound was faint through the glass, but it was steady, rhythmic, the sound of a place still alive despite everything. I thought of my father, how he used to say leadership wasn't about titles or contracts, but about standing where you're needed most. Tomorrow, I'd stand in front of every employee, tell them the truth, and give them more than promises. I'd give them proof that the fight was for them, and that it wasn't over. The auditorium was full, every chair taken, people standing along the walls. Faces I'd known for decades, and others I'd only seen in passing, looked up at me as I stepped onto the small stage. I didn't stand behind the podium. I moved to the edge, close enough to see the lines on their faces, the grease on their sleeves, the worry in their eyes. "You've heard the rumors," I began. "Some of them are true, some aren't. Here's what is." I told them about the planned layoffs and that they were cancelled. I told them about the safety reports Marcus had buried and that those protocols were already being restored. I told them about the merger that would have gutted our work and that it was dead. No grand slogans, no empty promises, just facts and the steps already in motion. When I finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then Pete, the welder, stood. "Guess we've got work to do," he said. It broke the tension. Applause rose, uneven at first, then strong. People smiled. Some shook hands, others hugged. As I stepped down from the stage, Evelyn caught my arm. "They believe you," she said. "They should," I replied. "This is their company as much as mine." The fight with Marcus wasn't done, but in that room I'd already won what mattered. Marcus was waiting in my office when I returned. No suit this time, just a grey shirt, sleeves rolled, the sharpness gone from his posture. "You could have handled this quietly," he said. "I could have," I replied, setting my notes on the desk. But then nothing would change. He studied me for a long moment. "You're going to run it into the ground, trying to be a hero." I shook my head. "I'm going to run it the way my father built it, with principles first. Profit follows." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "We'll see." He walked out without another word. The room was silent after the door closed. Outside, the factory hummed, the sound steady and alive. I sat at my desk, looking out the window at the rows of lit windows across the lot. People were working, building, keeping the promise my family had made decades ago. For the first time in years, it felt like the company was ours again. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of it settling on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as something worth carrying.